Our 3 oaths were absolute. As Orthodox Jews, they were binding Jewish law. Nothing new can be of the Torah. The Zionist movement was a satanic deception in the day of Theodore Herzl. Rashi was clear on not to return to Jewish Palestine until the day of the Moshiach.
Shalom, this is ben-Emmett, your humble host for my company. I'm the CEO of the Torah Watchman Show International LLC, located in Kent Mill, Maryland, of the United States of America. Hope everyone's been well. I have a very interesting documentary video. It is not long and verbose, but straight to the point. First of all, people have known my videos for many years on my YouTube channel. I have about 1,566 subscribers, so a lot of people know me by reputation, hopefully good reputation. I don't know if they know I'm a mensch or tzaddik. I don't know what they think of me. Hopefully they don't think I'm a hypocrite, because I shoot by the hip and I tell you nothing but the truth as I research this, okay? I'm a research scientist and analytics and things of this nature, a historian. But I want to just give you a brief intro here, okay? First of all, you know I'm a Baal Teshuva Jew, and I had years and years climbing up that ladder of repentance, Teshuva as you call it, and that kind of thing, and thoroughly immersed in Orthodox Judaism. My wife dragging her through that stuff, and even ultra-Orthodoxy as well. I mean, I was wearing a streamel, I was wearing a capote, and people who know I'm a self-declared Ka'ai Jew ask me why I have payos here, simply because the Torah had a commandment to all Jewish men to not trim the length of your sideburns. And the reason I grow this is not because of religion, it's because of ethnicity. Yes, I have distant ancestry among the ancient Yemenite Jews, and that's the only reason why I wear this. But anyway, I want to talk about something I've been taught in Orthodoxy for many, many years. And what is that? Well, first of all, Rashi is like the chief head rabbi of all things Ashkenazi and Chabadnik. It really is. Every commentary you read in an Art Scroll Chumash, for instance, references Rashi and Ramban, but primarily Rashi. If you go to Chabad's website, and I do donate them because I use their resources quite often, and they are the premier chief website for the Torah and education and knowledge, and they do some good things around the world. They're not helping my Jewish family in Uganda, even though I reached out to the capital of Uganda, and they won't even answer the phone. I don't know why. But what I'm trying to point out is that when you go to Chabad, and you go to their website and read their content, you will see you have choices between English and Hebrew, and either to show or hide commentary by none other than Rashi. Yes, Rashi quickly is a medieval rabbi who lived in the 11th century. He was a Frenchman, had daughters, no sons, and grew up in a wealthy and affluent Jewish community during that time. Now, Rashi made several declarations during that time, during his life, and he actually wrote a Mishnah Torah by his name, and also a heavy commentary and rewrite of the Talmud. He did a lot of good things. In fact, he rewrote the Talmud as we know it in a way that was intelligible, because it was written originally in Babylon. The Babel Talmud was the oldest when the Jews were still exiles there, and it was all Aramaic. It did not benefit from Masoretic text, and it was very confusing. And some of it was Hebrew, some of it was Aramaic, but none of it used Masoretic text. So he did his due diligence. He did good work of that. Okay, God bless him for doing that. However, one thing I had against Rashi, even as an Orthodox Jew, I could not understand it. Since Israel was founded in 1948, we know that there's nothing short of a miracle. They've won all those Arab wars and conflicts. 1967, they put the Arabs in place, and they seized land and territory. This is not because of the strength and might and intelligence of the Jew per se, in Israel, not by might but by the Spirit of the Lord only. I mean, that's what the Lord God said to Eliyahu many times, you know. It was a miracle. It was a miracle. It was a miracle, okay? Whatever. However, Rashi declared, I thought, you know, and other rabbis commented, the Hasidic masters per se, you know, how you say one thing, one whisper in someone's ear, it amplifies and all of that. Well, it became a narrative, and as something like halakha in Jewish law, because rabbinists like to invent their own laws, because there's not enough laws than 613 mitzvot in the Torah, right? But anyway, Rashi declared that Jews have no right to return to Jewish Palestine, aka Eretz Israel. And I'm talking about before Israel was Israel as it's known today in its governmental power, the IDF, IF, and all of that. You know, it's about 9 million of us in Israel today. You know, Baruch Yah, I mean, Am Yisrael Hai and all this. But I thought Rashi said that we are not allowed to return to the land and claim it, right? Until the day of the Mashiach. Until the day of Mashiach. I heard that mantra all the time, but I did not even understand it. But as an Orthodox Jew for years, I just respected that authority, and I thought that authority was given to them by God, you know, by God on Mount Sinai. But I don't want to get into all that. I have videos about that. This video is Rabbis Against Jews for Palestine, and I thought Rashi was one of those rabbis that was against Jewish Palestine. And you can look at the maps and all of that. It was never Arab Palestine. It's always Jewish Palestine. The Balfour Agreement, in the days of Theodore Herzl, you know, he was a proud secular Jew, not observant. I do believe he believed in God. He was not an atheist. He may have agnostic, but he just was not religious per se. But anyway, he was known. He branded the name Zionism, okay? And even today, Zionism has a lot of negative stereotypes and stigmas attached to it. But you know, where did all this resentment against Zionism originate? Well, folks, it was not Rashi, okay? May his memory be a blessing. Let's get started. The theological pioneer, none other than Chasam Sofer, many Chabadniks know who this person was, and they respect his authority during the days. He lived in the 17th century, 1762 to 1839. Long before political Zionism was even existed, Rabbi Moses Sofer, known as the Chasam Sofer of Bratislava, launched a strict conservative campaign against the European Jewish Enlightenment. And this was known as the word Haskalah. Haskalah. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the word. What it was talking about, you know, in the 1800s, the age of enlightenment, you had a Victorian era and things of this nature, people discovering new inventions and technological breakthroughs, studies of the human body and all this, higher education. Well, his philosophy, he coined the most famous ultra-Orthodox battle cry, was known as He-chadash hasher min ha-Torah. It simply means anything new is forbidden by the Torah. I guess he didn't think that the Talmud was more new than the writings of the 5 books of the Torah, or he would have condemned the Talmud or the Torah as well. But no. He was talking about things by the goy states and government and scientist things that we were surrounded by that time. And this is toward the end of the 17th century and well into the 18th century, he had these complaints. But he was so well respected among the Hasidim, the ultra-Orthodoxy, and everything else, that they adopted his commentary and his declarations outright as part of Jewish law or halakha. Now, what was the impact of these statements? Well, while he loved the land of Israel, as far as in a vision statement, and a lot of times you read in a Siddur, an Orthodox Siddur, and I have several versions of Siddurs in that. I love my Hardy Siddur because it's about this small. But anyway, you read about the love of the land of Israel, well, it's like yesteryear. Yeah, it's like yesteryear. They're talking about rebuilding Jerusalem. Well, they're talking about this happening far in the future, not now. Newsflash, Jerusalem has already been built and its walls are there. We don't depend on walled cities anymore, per se. And we live there securely, just like the prophet said. The Jews would return to Yehuda, and we would establish a state and a country and government, and the land would flourish for produce and fruit and animal life and everything. That's happened. These are prophecies fulfilled, and Rabbis are talking about we are in the middle of the end days. Mashiach comes soon. But they love the land of Israel itself. His rigid worldview taught European Jews to fear any massive societal shift or modern political movement. He did not tell them to get out of Dodge. He did not warn them to the point, you will be seduced by these European powers and you will want what the Gentiles are living, their worldview construct, versus what I taught you, the Jewish worldview. And that is a more or less true statement. You have to be careful with that. Nachmanides, or something called fencing, like God told Moshe and the children of Israel, put fences around Mount Sinai. Do not go across that boundary. You would die. You're contaminated, sinful people. That's the same kind of idea about fences around your behavior to keep you from being seduced and becoming sinners, right? Well, that's what that's talking about. It became actually a political movement. That's what religion is. It's 50 Shades of Gray, it's debates and things like that. Well, he laid the foundational ideology that modern human-led political movements were inherently dangerous to spiritual survival. If it was so dangerous to live in the land of Narnia, to live in Europe and not in the land of Israel or the Jewish Palestine, then why didn't he tell everyone, let's go home, let's fulfill prophecy, if Moshe was here, what would he say to us? We're not in exile, and none of the Jews in his European nations, I'm talking about Spain, Germany, Romania, Lithuania, Poland, and England, all these countries, they were not there by force. They could have tried to return, and there were Jews that have never ever left Israel. Let's get that straight. North and South Israel, there are Jews that have been there since the time, 2,000 years ago at least, the great exile. Generations of Jews filtering and coming there. They may have not been very religious, but they have always lived in the land. Let's get that straight now, okay? We've always been there, and all the protractors against Jews returning to Israel, we're just going home. We're just going home. But politics, I agree with him to stay away from politics, world politics. And, the Third Reich was definitely very political, in Poland in the 1930s. Now, the direct catalyst, okay, was known as Rabbi Shalom Dover Schneerson. Yeah, you remember the name Schneerson? We're talking about Chabadniks. I have crossed into the Lashon Hara area. You have to be careful. Do I dare? Yes, I do. And anyway, he lived 1860 to 1920. We used to all considered righteous, tzaddiks, menches, founding fathers of Judaism, we know today. That's true. But as modern political Zionism gained massive steam in Europe, modern Orthodoxy, I guess, the word Orthodox Judaism did not exist until probably around 1860. You heard me right. Jews actually, if you date us back to the the Anonism, that goes back to the 8th century, very easily, but beyond the point. Now go on there.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam.
Now, as a modern political Zionism was gaining massive steam in Europe, under Theodor Herzl, in the late 1890s, the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, known as the Rashab, many people know this name, if I pronounce it correctly, became the primary catalyst for organizing institutional rabbinic opposition. Opposition to what? Well, Enlightenment, the age of Enlightenment. Anything new is not of the Torah, unless it's the Torah that the rabbis wrote long after the canons of the 5 books of the Torah were closed and respected and everything else. And the prophets, the last prophet spoke, that was not stoned by other Jews because they didn't like what they were saying, but that's the way it was. They were opposing anything around them, and this caused a lot of Gentile resistance around them, okay? At the same time, they were profiting off the Gentile economies. Jews are well known, since the Roman Catholics did not allow us to own land. Well, they used their intellect, and there's a lot of Jews with Nobel Prizes and scientific awards abound. Remember Einstein, But anyway, they made their wealth in the financial markets and trading and mercantile trade. Well, they made a lot of money in that. And all that money changing, well, that money went to donations to build new synagogue and went to the coffers of these big rabbis that were like governors of dynasties throughout Europe, like in Lithuania. A lot of the Satmars are to this day date their beginnings in those countries, not going there. Now, the turning point was in 1901. Now, Rabbi Schneerson, and this is not known to Rebbe, this is a predecessor, okay, in the same family line of that dynasty, he published a famous anti-Zionist manifesto titled Or Sharim, which means light for the upright. An anti-Zionist manifesto, essentially, and he talked about Theodor Herzl. Theodor Herzl's picture is actually in the Knesset to this day. He's looked up as a hero of Zionism, a founder of Zionism, and all Zionism, quickly, I don't want to get off the rabbit hole, is just being proud of living in Israel. Both secular and religious Jews can be Zionists, and a lot of Zionists that work for the IDF, it is what it is. But it's not the devil, I'm sorry. But anyway, moving forward. The message was actually, he explicitly warned European Jews not to join or support the Zionist migration to Palestine. Do I need to repeat this? Do not support the secular Zionism migration philosophy or political movement to move to Palestine. Folks, quickly, I don't want to get off topic. In the time of Theodor Herzl, there was a British colony of Uganda. And I already did a video of this, and I helped to fund and build their very first brick and mortar, essentially, synagogue there in Uganda. Well, there have been Jews there for 100 years, and primarily because of Theodor Herzl. He's the one that worked with the British Empire, as they were known during that time or whatever. He said, hey, the Balfour Agreement is that all this land, and your Christian books and everything else, there's maps here, and in King Solomon, all this land belongs to the Jewish people. Why, if they cannot go there for whatever political reason, the Ottomans and whatever, Iran and all this, well, there's a place they can go and live safely in Uganda, in the British colony. It's largely unsettled. It's just wild wilderness, elephants and giraffes and tigers and bears are all mine. But anyway, but a lot of the Jews did not want to go there. They wanted to stay in Russia where all the pogroms are going on, and that was the issue what Theodor brought up. You being attacked, you're being, your life quality statement is being altered. You cannot raise your children in safety. Every time you set up a community, you'll run out of town. Remember the Theodor, the Fiddler on the Roof, that kind of story. That was what Theodor Herzl was up against. And the Sixth Jewish World Congress recognized Jews in Uganda, mainly African, black Africans were there, but they have their origins largely because of Theodor Herzl. So let's get this out of the way. That was part of the migration to Palestine issue that this rabbi was totally against. He argued that secular Zionists wanted to strip the Jews of the Torah and replace God with nationalism, okay? Well, you know, in the country of America where I was born, and I'm very proud to be a combat war veteran here, served my duty in the U.S. Air Force, you know, and everything else, disabled, technically right now. But anyway, what he was talking about is that, you know, in this country we've accepted everyone, both Jews and people from Europe, and you know, even Christopher Columbus, Jews were coming to America, and the 3 ships that sailed from England and set up the 13 colonies, there were Jews on there too. I traced my ancestry with all of that. But he was saying is that nationalistic spirit cannot both exist with Torah-fearing Jews. Well, I guess he did not understand the Torah as well as he claimed, and he combined the Torah with the Talmud, and that's not the same thing. That's opinionated. That is subjective reasoning versus objective reasoning. I've been through this before, but anyway, he was saying you cannot be a nationalist Jew and be a Torah-centered Jew. Why can you? Was it King David a nationalist Jew? Was it a kingdom building? Didn't he invade the Canaanite city of Salem and transform into Jerusalem as his city? I mean, God said, go and conquer Canaan. This is a nationalistic spirit. And didn't the 12 tribes of Israel have banners and flags and all these things? Where do you think the Star of David came from? Essentially, traced back to at least the time of King Solomon. Okay? It is what it is. So you understand the dichotomy of truths here, and all these statements of rabbis that were essentially equated to prophets and divinely appointed judges in themselves. Whatever they said was their truth, and their truth went down the generation to other Jews following them and setting up other synagogues in the future. Okay? So this nationalistic spirit was an apnea. It was something that left a bad taste in these Chabadniks' mouth. Do not talk about nationalism. Why? I'll ask you one question. In Chabad, and I've been with Chabad for years too, why do they not have an Israeli flag on display within their shul? Why don't they have an American flag on display in their shul? Why didn't Rabbi Schneerson, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, why didn't he not set foot at all in Eretz Israel given his life? Why? Because of that Zionist hatred, that anti-Zionist movement, anti-nationalistic spirit movement. Every country deserves to have a nationalistic spirit. There's nothing wrong. I don't know a country that of the day, throughout the world, that does not have some sort of national anthem or motivation to be proud of country. Like in America, it was God and country when we fought in the Normandy invasion in World War II to defeat the Nazis. But I'm just saying this nationalism was viewed there as something that's anti-Torah. Okay? So he firmly stated that forcing a mass return to the land by human political means was a direct violation of, at least he's honest here, all the Talmudic 3 oaths. Okay? Now, the video you saw before I started this video went into that a little bit further, you know, the 3 oaths that was made. Let's talk about this. Now, the ultimate codifier was Rabbi Joel Teitelbaum. He lived from 1887 to 1979. In my opinion, this rabbi, not Rashi, was the instigator that led the Jews staying put throughout Europe, and that led to them to being rounded up by the Nazis and to the end of 6 million Jews being murdered, burned, and gassed, and that included 600,000 children of blessed memory. This rabbi took these ideas and formalized them into an absolute, uncompromising prohibition against living in a sovereign Israel state was the Satmar Rebbe, Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum. Remember that name, the Satmar Rabbi. He had a lot of input and during 1948, and then the founding of our first basic laws and things like this, and he wanted assurances that there would be no prayer in Temple Mount. There would so many exceptions and things of that nature. Well into 1967, they posted placards: "No Jews allowed to pray on Temple Mount." All of this. This is why we have the status quo, because of rabbis like him. Now, this is not my opinion. This is just putting the data together historically. You can research yourself. Please do. Okay? Now, if you want to look this up, the Koch Center of Advanced Judaic Studies has this information. You know, history is neither good or bad as long as it's accurate. And if you go back and understand where we came from, how do you know you will be in the future? You just don't know. Largely, generation today, Generation X, is a generation who is ignorant of their history, who has no history. They revise it because they hate it and they think it's hateful. Even doing my analysis to artificial intelligence and creating videos and stuff, Google Gemini tells me sometimes that what you're saying here is too hateful. We don't allow hate speech in AI. Well, even if it's historical, they don't allow it. You know, you teach this stuff in schools, supposedly to your schools, but even Google is against it. You know, it is what it is. Now, the text, the actual text. He offered a comprehensive theological book titled Vayol Moshe, The Extreme Stance. Writing in the mid-20th century, he argued that the three oaths were absolute, binding Jewish law or halakha. This is law. When you hear the word halakha, this is not the 613 mitzvot, certainly not the 10 commandments. When you hear the word halakha, this is halakha that the rabbis, specifically medieval rabbis, and so on, well up into the 18th century, codified in the Talmud, primarily the Babylonian Talmud, secondary the Jerusalem or Palestine Talmud, as they call it. Okay, that one, the second one, was not even finished because we got kicked out of Israel, by 135 CE. Not that important. But he claimed that the Zionist movement was a satanic deception. You heard what I said. And I've heard the ultra-Orthodox rabbis saying this to this day. Satanic deception. And he famously blamed the horrors of the Holocaust on the Zionists. Not people like Rabbi Yoel Tannenbaum and his comment, who grossly mistranslated, misinterpreted what Rashi, well-meaning, said. Up in the 1800s, rabbis were encouraging Jews to go back to Palestine. And they did. They absolutely did. But until around the 19th century, earlier than that, things changed radically. Okay? Zionism that want to be nationalistic spirit, to return. What do you call that burning in your heart when you have a motivation to go to Israel, to return to Israel? It's still Israel. The Roman Empire may have renamed it Syria Philistia, but it's still Israel. It's still Israel. We know that land. Every grain of sand there, it belongs to tribal Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel. Because God said so, not because man said so. But, he just went out on the rails there, calling it a satanic deception. He blamed the horrors of the Holocaust as God's punishment on those evil Zionists that were politically control of the minds and will of European Jews. Well, the thing is, the Jews that stayed put, and not all of them did, thank God, like Moroccan Jews. The Zohar in the first volume of Zohar, and I have it in my library, the research material, talks about Moroccan Jews saw a dark cloud going over Europe as a portent of the future, near future, of something evil happening. While they stayed there, some went to Indonesia, some went to Philippines, some of them went to Australia. But most of them stayed in Europe, and that's where they died. Why? Because the rabbis told them to wait on the Mashiach. Why? Where did they get those marching orders? Supposedly from Rashi. Now, if Rashi did not say what he said, he didn't want a huge invasion of Palestine by the Jews, like a strong military force, that kind of thing, because he didn't want Jews to be killed. He knew they had military powers in that land. And he knew that if it went there, because in the past, if God was not with you, you would be killed. But he believed in integral, gradual re-migration and population of the land by Jews. That's what he believed. But they misconstrued what he said, made no new Jewish law outside the Torah, and made it an absolute thing that you are not returned to Israel by any means, for any reason whatsoever, until the Mashiach says, hey, it's time to come back to Israel. Right? Very interesting, I think. So, only Mashiach would be the trigger for that. Well, the way I read Bible prophecy in Zechariah, Ezekiel, the war of Gog and Magog and everything else, you see there's a time that the Jews will finally return to Israel, and it's a gradual integral process, not something will happen overnight. It's been happening leading up to 1948 because of people like Theodor Herzl had the motivation, the dream of a homeland again. You don't have to attend a synagogue every single Shabbat in order to be a proud Jew. And I mean, there's a lot of scientists in Israel, a lot of people serve in IDF to defend that country there from numerous threats of terrorism. They are not very religious. They go to synagogue whenever they can, but going to synagogue does not make you an observant Jew per se. It's more legalistic. And I tell my wife all the time, I think I work more on Shabbat getting ready to go to synagogues, when my body and my soul wants to rest in my bed. But anyway, why has this happened? Why did they discourage it? Well, these 19th century rabbis, in conclusion, did not oppose the land of Israel in itself. They opposed secularism, how they defined secularism. And Theodor Herzl was the lead secularist, according to their imagination. So before the 1800s, almost every European rabbi encouraged individual religious aliyah. Individual families, but not individual nation states, okay, per se. And this discussion was going on, incidentally, a historical footnote here, going on with the Grand Mufti of Palestine. This is well known, and Benjamin Netanyahu released it several years ago, and he was criticized for saying it. He met with Hitler, and Hitler wanted to deport all the Jews from Europe that he wanted to invade those countries back to Palestine. The Samar Rebbe said, I don't want these people, why don't you burn them? That's all I need to say about it, but it's true, okay? That's the situation that the Jews were in the 1930s in Poland and Germany and elsewhere. They saw the caricatures, the evil satanic imagery of the Jews and rabbis themselves. All the warning claxons were sounding, but they stayed put. And they were waiting on the rabbis to give them the marching order, and the marching order never came. Why? And I've just explained it to you. This discouragement only began when the migration of Palestine changed from a quiet religious act of devotion, like going to the hotel per se, and we have black and white photos of that in the 1800s. Devotion to a modern secular political national movement was opposed to. So as long as it's religious and not secular, it's okay, I guess. So the rabbis feared that if European Jews moved to Palestine under a secular banner, secular banner is AKA our Israeli flag. Secular banner is ha-Tikvah, that talks about the Nefesh Yehudi, talks about the soul of the Jew in the land. That's what they're talking about, and that's why the Israeli flag, you will not find it in any Chabadnik synagogue. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you find that flag, please find some way to take a picture and give it to me, okay? I'm not against these Jews. I was there before, but I speak from the experience and background of attending those services. And I donate them because I believe they're a worthy cause, even to this day, okay? Again, the Torah is not the Talmud. A Talmud is not needed to make a Jew religious. Religion abides by cultism. It really does. Why you think we have so many denominations in Judaism today is over religious Talmudic arguments and debates. Okay, that's what it is. That's why cultism. We do not use the Talmud as our final rule of arbitration of truth. We only use the 5 books of the Torah, the words of the beautiful Nabi and the prophets, the sacred writing, all of this. We don't have to create books ourselves to explain the inner mysteries of the Torah and then make up our own laws because we live in a diaspora for whatever reason. Okay, we don't have to do that. 2 primary statements by Rashi were taken out of context to discourage European Jews from returning to their ancestral land. And what are they? Well, misrepresenting Rashi's definition of as a wall known as Beth-Kamash. This is very interesting. I did not know this until I researched this, okay? In the Talmudic passage concerning the 3 oaths, and here we go again, the text states that Jews are sworn not to ascend to Israel Beth-Kama, literally as a wall. In other words, as a surge or as a military force, okay? However, Rashi's actual context is a little bit different. Rashi defines the Hebrew idiom very concisely. Together, as a muspoka, by a strong hand, yakad be-yad hazaka. And we say this word hazaka by strength and everything at the end of every parsha, don't we? Right? So in the medieval context, Rashi was explaining that Jews should not organize a massive, unauthorized, who authorizes this? I don't know. Unless it's God. Armed military invasion to conquer the land from the ruling empire. Newsflash, and I debate this with Christians regularly, even to this day. The Jews did not invade Palestine in 1948. United Nations at that time, okay, were actually more pro-Israel than they are now. Now they're a bunch of anti-Semitic schmucks and putts. They really are. I'm sorry for cursing in Yiddish. That's true. But they actually said, after the horrors of the Holocaust ended in 1945, the Jews need a homeland so they can be protected. Well, they gave them a small sliver of desert and swampland in Israel in 1948. And the Arabs came and tried to kill them and murder them and drive them out. They lost miserably because God was with them. The Jews did not invade Palestine. The Jews returned home peacefully after the Holocaust by the higher authority of the UN and different members of the United Nations Security Council, whatever. They voted resolution for this. So there was a security resolution, I guess, for this, but do not time. I don't know all the history. Since we understand what Rashi's actual context was, he said, he said there should not be a military surge to take the land without any higher authorization. He did not have the higher authorization. Only a prophet of God would, right? Okay? Didn't Moshe was the higher authority that gave Joshua the right and to lead the Jewish people in his stead into Canaan and conquer those lands? Of course. And then the various kings of Israel did the rest of the higher authority there. But what happened, despite what Rashi really said versus the exaggeration of what he did not say, the 19th century distortion. Later rabbis read in their own apocalyptic theology backward into Rashi. Like I said, you don't like history? Well, you revise that history and you change people's words and take them out of context. Folks, that is Lashon Hara. The word is invented by rabbinites to protect themselves, but that is Lashon Hara. I mean, Rashi, who they revere so much as a chief lawgiver, they equate him to Moshe, that's what it seems like. Rabbi Akiva and all these people, okay? They claim that Rashi's commentary implied that any human effort to build infrastructure, farm the land, or establish communities in Palestine was an arrogant, sinful attempt to force the end, fulfill prophecy without the Messiah, or the Mashiach, or Mashiach as you call it. They transformed Rashi's caution against spiritual impatience. And I understand this. The reason why you're exiled is because of sin of your generation, of your ancestors, right? Right? We've been exiled for a very long time. Jews in America are not exiled anymore. Why? Because Israel has been a country since 1948. We are in America as Jews because we choose to be for various reasons, and we talked about this before. Okay? They transformed Rashi's caution, halt, wait, think before you leave, caution against spiritual impatience into a strict legal halakha, again, prohibition against physical migration or immigration. Okay? So in synopsis, do you understand what I'm saying to be true here? I'm not condemning the sects of Orthodox Judaism. I never, even as an Orthodox Jew, I never cared for Satmars. I never cared for them. In fact, I think they're the worst as far as our reputation. We need to do PR damage control because of the Satmars. I don't think they deserve to even be in Israel based on what they said. And I've quoted some of the things they said. Okay? They are pro-Palestinian, and I've heard of them kissing, they were kissing the coffin of Yasser Arafat when he died. I mean, they are just outrageous. They're outrageous. And you've seen the movie, the show on TV, on the ISIS channel on Netflix, Shitzel. Well, the story about ultra-Orthodox Jews, Yom Yerushalayim Day, teachers, the rabbi in the yeshiva says you're not allowed to see the jets go over. They benefit from all the wonderful things of living in the land and prayer at the Kotel on the Western Wall, but they don't respect the government that defends them. And today, when the draft is law in Israel, a lot of Chabadniks, Hasidic Jews, especially the ultra-Orthodox Jews, the Satmars, are just crying foul and protesting and everything else and saying, we are commanded by God to read the Torah and nothing else all day long in the yeshiva. I did a video on this. The primary books that are read in the yeshiva are not the Chumash, not the Torah scroll. Torah scroll is brought out during Mincha and different prayers, of course, and all that. You have a Torah Matzar, a portion of that is read, but the primary education material is the Talmud, the Mishnah Torah written by Rashi and Ramban and other medieval rabbis. That's what's taught, the rabbinical interpretation of the Torah that mirrors in parallel with the words of the prophets of Moshe. That's what's taught. But they think that it gives an exempt. You have to prove that you're a son of Levi for that to even make sense, even in the Torah. Well, I probably said too much and probably got myself in trouble, but listen, don't shoot the messenger. I wanted to get this information out. If you are a Kahai Jew or whatever you call yourself today, don't blame Rashi for the Holocaust. Don't blame Rashi for telling Jews to sit there in Europe and be rounded up by Hitler. And even the townspeople, like in Poland and other countries, in Spain and all this, Lithuania, they were rounded up by the townspeople, and Ukraine was the worst of that, okay? Anyway, Hakam Yarabin signing out to the next time. God bless you, God keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you, that Shekinah, glorious, delicious, and sweet. And may he lift up his countenance upon you, and may he give you perfect peace. That's my wish for you. Shalom. Take care. God bless you. Shalom Aleichem.
If you've enjoyed this program, please click like and subscribe.